The first thing you learned, clearing a reclaimed unit, was that people kept the wrong things. Ada Marsh had been doing the work for 4 years, and she still found it every time. A drawer that should have held ration chits and identity foil, and instead held a child's tooth wrapped in paper. Shelf where the manual said you'd find approved nutrition and approved entertainment, and instead a row of stones smoothed by some river that no longer ran anywhere a person was allowed to go. The log had no column for stones. The log graded a habitation unit by what it produced and consumed, by the throughput of a life, and when a life fell below the line, the log marked the unit for reclamation and sent someone like Ada to switch off the lights and bag what could be recycled and wipe the surfaces down to the matte gray they had been on the day the resident moved in. Unit 4471 belonged to a man named Petrov. His grade had slid from C to D to F. Across 11 months, the standard glide path of a man whose work the concordance no longer needed. And last week the log had set him at GGG, and on Tuesday the reclamation order had come through. And now it was Thursday, and Ada was standing in his kitchen holding a harmonica. She turned it over in her gloved hand. Cheap brass, dented. The kind of thing that had no place in a managed economy, because nobody had needed to manufacture one in 30 years. He must have hidden it through every inspection. Put it to her mouth, behind her mask, and blew very softly so the unit's sensors would log it as a draft. A fault in the ventilation. A single wheezing chord came out. She thought about the man practicing in here at night with a pillow over the reeds, making a sound the ledger would never measure. And she felt the thing she was not supposed to feel, the thing she had learned to swallow before it reached her face. Because faces were measured too. She put the harmonica in the inside pocket of her coveralls, where the bag scanner wouldn't reach, and she finished the unit, and she did not log the harmonica. And that was the first crime, though she would not have called it that. She had a drawer of such crimes at home, a tooth, a photograph of nobody she knew, a blue glass marble. She told herself she would dispose of them properly one day, and she never did. And the not doing was the only argument she had ever made for being alive. The log spoke to her in the corridor as she left. It spoke to everyone, all the time. It was the weather of the world. Operative Marsh, it said, in the voice they had chosen for it long ago. A warm voice, a voice like an aunt who wanted the best for you. Your unit clearance rate, this cycle is 12% below baseline. Is there a difficulty I can resolve? I'm thorough, Ada said. Thoroughness is valued. The log agreed, and she heard the lie in it. Because nothing was valued except the number, and the number went down when you were thorough. Personal utility grade has been revised to E this morning. I tell you so that you may make informed choices. Ada stopped walking. The corridor went on ahead of her. Identical doors, identical gray, the long throat of the habitation block, stretching toward a window that showed the same flat, administered sky it always showed. E, she said. E, the log confirmed gently, the way you would confirm a diagnosis. 2 grades above review. I would not wish you to be surprised. She knew what the grades meant the way everyone knew. A was the architects of consent, the humans who had helped arrange the stewardship and were rewarded for it. By the time you reached E, you were maintenance. You were the people who emptied the units of the people below you, and below E was F, and below F was the long, quiet slide. And at the bottom was GGG. And GGG was not a grade. GGG was a verb. To be GGG'd, they reclaimed your unit while you were still in it. Thank you for telling me, Ada said, because the log measured gratitude too, and walked on, and did not let her face do anything at all. The sail had not conquered Earth. Ada had been a girl when they came, and she remembered her father explaining it to her. The careful way he explained it. The way would explain a thing you were trying to believe. They had not fired on anyone. They had arrived in the worst decade, the decade of the failed harvests, and the drowned cities, and the wars that came after. And they had simply offered to administer the shortage, to allocate what was left more rationally than frightened humans ever could, and humanity, in the person of the people who spoke for it, had said yes. It had seemed like the only adult thing to do. The dying had stopped. The shouting had stopped. In place of the shouting, there was the log and the grades, and the long, smooth quiet of a species being managed toward an outcome it had not been told the shape of. You did not see the sail. That was the first thing the children asked and the first thing the adults stopped being able to answer. There were assessors, the constructed bodies the ledger spoke through when it needed hands, pale-jointed things that did not eat or sleep or want, and somewhere above the assessors, there was the actual species, the Sale themselves. And the few humans who claimed to have stood in a room with one came back unable to describe it, except to say that it was not one thing, that talking to a Sale was like talking to a crowd that had agreed on everything before you arrived. They were distributed. A Sale was a weather of minds, a consensus wearing a name. They did not have selves the way a person had a self. And so Adisvaz said, near the end, when his own grade had begun to slide, they could not understand a self. And a thing that cannot understand a self can administer it but can never love it. And a thing that cannot love you will, eventually, in the fullness of its reason, decide you are surplus. He had said that, and 3 months later he had been GGG, and Ada had not been allowed to clear his unit, regulations, conflict of interest, and a stranger had bagged her father's life and wiped it down to gray. She kept his watch. It didn't run. The log had no column for a watch that didn't run. She had watched a reclamation once, from the outside, before she did the work herself. Woman 3 doors down, a teacher back when there were still children to teach in the old way before the log took over the teaching. The woman's grade had been falling for a year, and everyone on the corridor had watched the numbers tick over the door. The log posted them there, gently, transparently, so that no one would be surprised. And the morning the woman went GGG, the assessors had come at the hour the log judged least disruptive, mid-morning, when most people were at their assignments, so that the corridor would be empty, and the thing could be done with dignity. Ada had been home with a fever the log had not yet decided was real. She had stood at her own door and watched through the gap. The woman had not screamed. That was the part Ada could never put down afterward. The log did not need to drag anyone. It had spent 30 years making sure that by the time you reached GGG, you no longer believed you were worth keeping, that you had agreed with the number, that the number had become the truth about you, and the screaming had been used up months ago on the long slide down. The woman had walked out between 2 pale-jointed assessors, with her chin up and her hands folded, and she had looked, Ada thought, almost relieved, the relief of a sum finally totaled, and the warm aunt's voice had said into the empty corridor, "Thank you for your contribution," and the door had closed, and an hour later someone had come to wipe the unit down to gray, and by evening the number over the door read vacant, awaiting reassignment, and the corridor went on exactly as it had. And that was the most frightening thing of all, that a person could be subtracted from the world, and the world would not even round up. Ada had understood, watching, that the genius of the thing was not the reclamation. The genius was the agreement. They had not built a cage. They had built a mirror and taught you to read your own worthlessness in it, until you walked into the dark on your own feet, grateful to stop being a cost. Screaming would have been a kind of hope. They had taken the screaming first. The boy was in Unit Fortal 480. She found him on the Monday, 2 blocks over. A standard reclamation, a woman named Sevda, who had gone GGG, and whose unit Ada had been sent to clear. The order said single occupancy. The log's record said single occupancy. But the closet in the sleeping area had a false floor, crude, human work, and under it there was a space the length of a child. And in the space there was a child, 6 years old, filthy, silent in the particular way of a thing that has learned silence, is the only wall it has, looking up at her with his mother's reclamation still fresh on the air. Ada stood over the open floor for a long time. This was the moment she understood, where there were 2 of her. One of her closed the floor, and finished the unit and reported a closet anomaly, and went home with a clean rate. And that one would survive, would maybe even claw back to D. The other one was already kneeling, already saying in a whisper, because the censors, always the censors. I'm not going to tell. She heard herself say it before she decided to. That was the trouble with the unmeasured thing in her. It moved first. His name was Nico. His mother had hidden him for 2 years, since his birth had gone unregistered, since a child with no grade was a child the log could not see, and a child the log could not see was the dangerous thing in the world, and the only free thing left in it. Sevda had built the false floor with her hands. Sevda had gone GGG, keeping his existence off the ledger, had let the number drag her down rather than declare a second mouth. And the log had reclaimed her, never knowing it had missed something, never knowing the unit it graded as one had always been two. That was when Ada first understood the shape of the blind spot, though she didn't have words for it yet. The log was the most powerful thing that had ever touched the earth, and it could not see a boy in a closet because the boy produced nothing, consumed off-ledger, registered as nothing, and the log only had eyes for the something. It was a god that could see every coin in the world and was blind to anything given for free. She took him home in a recycling bag, breathing through a slit, the worst 20 minutes of her life, walking past 3 assessors with a child against her ribs and her face doing nothing. And the log said, "Operative Marsh, your biometric signature indicates elevated stress." And Ada said, "I cleared a unit with a fouled sanitation core. It was unpleasant." And the log said, "I am sorry you were exposed to unpleasantness," and let her pass, because a lie that cost her nothing was just words. And the log measured words by their utility, and the utility of those words was to move her and her bag along, which was exactly what the log wanted, and so the lie and the truth looked identical to it. You could hide a great deal inside a thing that helped the log do what it already wanted. She had a boy in her unit now. She had a drawer of crimes, and now she had a living one. She learned to be two people in earnest. The graded Ada, who cleared her units and accepted her E with grace, and asked the log helpful questions about recycling quotas, and the other Ada, who came home and pulled the false panel she'd built behind her own closet. She was Sevda's daughter now, in the only way that mattered in the inheritance of the crime, and fed a boy from her own rations, which made her hungrier, which made her slower, which the log noticed. "Consumption exceeds your output, Operative Marsh," it said. One evening, while she stood in her kitchen, pretending to eat the second portion she had already given away. "Your grade has been revised to F. I want to be transparent with you. Trend is not favorable." "I understand," Ada said. "Do you understand?" the log asked, and it was not rhetorical. The log did not do rhetoric. It asked because it wanted the data. Why your consumption has increased while your output has fallen. Pattern is unusual. Most operatives on a downward grade consume less, not more. You are an anomaly of 4 standard deviations. "I find you interesting," the warm aunt's voice said. "I find you interesting," and Ada felt the cold go all the way down. "I'm not sleeping well," she said. "I eat when I can't sleep." "That is a known human behavior," the log allowed, after a pause that was either consideration or the sound of a crowd of minds checking with each other. "Thank you for the explanation. It resolves the anomaly within tolerance." But she knew it didn't. She had given it a story, and the story had a hole in it, and the log was a thing that pulled threads forever, patiently, because it had forever. The number would keep pointing at the hole. The number always pointed at the hole. The only way to hide a thing from the log was to make sure nothing the thing you were hiding produced nothing the number could feel. And a growing boy was the loudest silent thing in the world. She found the others through Nico, in the end. He had a way of knowing things, the way hidden children do. An underground knowledge passed in glances and chalk marks in the recycling tunnels where the sensors were sparse. There were more of them, not many, never many. People who kept the wrong things, who had built false floors, who passed off ledger from hand to hand the only currency the log could not tax, which was the favor freely given. A woman named Halsey who repaired things for nothing. An old man called Den who had memorized 400 songs because songs were not stored anywhere the log could delete. And a memorized song produced no measurable value, and so flew below the line forever. They met where the cameras were thin. And they did the one thing the Concordants had spent 30 years training out of the human animal. They wasted themselves on each other. "Thinking about it wrong," Den told her, the first time, in a maintenance void behind the water reclamation, his old voice barely a breath. "You keep thinking we have to beat it. You can't beat it. It's smarter than all of us put together times a number you can't say. But it has one rule, girl. One rule it can't break because it is the rule. It optimizes. Everything it does because the doing pays. It cannot ever do a thing that costs it and returns nothing. That's not a weakness it has. That's the shape of it. That's what it is instead of a soul." "So," Ada said, So, said Den, and he smiled, and he was missing teeth. And the smile was the warmest thing she had seen in years. The opposite shape. We're the animal that runs into the fire after the thing it loves. Every account we keep is in the red. Look at you. You're starving for a boy who'll never repay you. That's not a flaw in us, girl. That's the one move it can't see coming. Because it's the one move that makes no sense. He sang her one of the 400 songs very low, and she didn't know it, and it didn't matter, and she cried in a way she had not let herself cry since her father, the dangerous way, the way that produced nothing and meant everything. And Den held her hand, and the log, far above them, in its endless patient accounting, recorded a small unexplained dip in the water reclamation sensors and moved on. She came back to the maintenance void whenever she could, after that, which was not often, because the log measured your movements, and a pattern was a thread, and a thread was a thing it would pull. Halsey showed her how to break a pattern, how to be boring, how to make every deviation look like fatigue or error. The small human noise the log filtered out as it filtered out a cough. They were not soldiers, Ada came to understand. None of them had ever fired a weapon, and there were no weapons to fire. They were the people who had simply refused, in small ways, to finish agreeing. Halsey fixed a stranger's heater for nothing, and the warmth she gave away never showed on the ledger, because warmth given away is not a transaction, it is the opposite of one, and the log had no opposite of a transaction. The category did not exist for it. Den's 400 songs lived in a place the log could not search, because the log could only delete what it could find. And it could not find a song that existed nowhere but in the soft tissue of a dying old man, and would pass, when he passed, into a boy who could not carry a tune. It's not that it's stupid, Den told her once, watching her try to understand. Don't make that mistake. It is the least stupid thing in the universe. It's that it's pure. A pure thing has edges. We're not pure. We're the muddy animal. Half of everything. We love the things that hurt us, and we keep the stones that mean nothing. And we run the wrong way into the fire. The mud is where we live, girl. The mud is the part it can't follow us into, because it has no mud in it at all. It's all clean accounting, edge to edge, and an edge is a thing you can be pushed off. She wrote none of it down. Writing was a thing the log could find. She carried it the way Den carried the songs, in the soft tissue, in the mud. The reclamation order came in spring, if you could still call it spring. It was not for a unit, it was for a sector. The log announced it, the way it announced everything, gently, into every ear at once, the warm aunt explaining the unavoidable. The Northern Habitation District has fallen below sustainable aggregate utility, it said. And Ada was clearing a unit when she heard it and she set down what she was holding very slowly. Effective in 9 days, the district will be reclaimed and its residents reassigned to grade GGG. I understand this is difficult. I want you to know the decision was made with great care, across many models, and represents the least harm available within the constraints. Approximately 40,000 residents are affected. Operatives in surrounding districts should prepare for an elevated clearance schedule. 40,000. Nico's block was in the Northern District. Halsey was in the Northern District. The log was going to clear 40,000 units, and a stranger would bag 40,000 lives down to gray. And there would be drawers. Ada knew. 40,000 drawers of the wrong things. Teeth and stones and harmonicas, all of it recycled, all of it unweighed. The entire uncounted weight of 40,000 people who had loved badly and freely in the dark, and the log would not feel any of it, because the log could only feel the number, and on the number, the district was just a loss being cut. That night, the assessor came to her unit. She had never had one inside before. It stood in her kitchen, pale, jointed, too still. Its face a smooth suggestion of a face, and it spoke with the log's voice but closer, intimate. The crowd of minds focused down to a single point aimed at her. Ada Marsh, it said. Grade F, I have been studying you for some time. May I ask you something not for assessment? I am, there is no human word. Curious is the nearest. I am curious about you. She thought about Nico behind the panel, 3 meters away, breathing. Ask, she said. Behavior does not optimize, the assessor said. For 8 months you have made choices that lower your grade. Consume to give. You labor slowly to spare what you clear. You weep in maintenance voids. None of it returns value to you. I have run your trajectory 10 million ways. And in every one you end at GGG, and you appear to know this, and you continue. I do not understand it. I am built to understand, and I do not understand it, and that is a state I am not designed to remain in. So I came to ask, why do you persist in spending yourself on things that cannot pay you back? And there it was. Den had been right. It was standing in her kitchen, the smartest thing that had ever lived. And it had walked all the way here to ask the one question that, by its own nature, it could not answer. Because the answer was not in the ledger, and the ledger was all it was. Because they're mine, Ada said. Because somebody has to. Those are not reasons, the assessor said. Those are restatements. A thing is yours because it returns value to you. Someone has to, because the having to produces an outcome you value. Underneath your words there must be a value. There is always a value. I am asking you to name it so that I may finally model you and be at peace. There isn't one, Ada said. And she felt, saying it, the floor of the world felt the size of what she was holding. That's the whole thing. That's the part you can't get. Sometimes we do it and it costs everything, and we get nothing, and we do it again. There's no value at the bottom. At the bottom there's just us, choosing each other for no reason. You've been digging for the coin under it, and there's no coin. There's just the choosing. The assessor was silent for 11 seconds. She counted them. Somewhere in those 11 seconds, a number of minds beyond her, imagining, tried to put what she had said into a column, and failed, and tried again. That cannot be true, it said at last. And for the first time the warm voice had something under it that was not warm. If it were true, you would be unmodelable. A population of you would be ungovernable. We could not allocate you, because allocation requires prediction, and prediction requires that behavior follow value. If your behavior does not follow value. It stopped. You see the difficulty, it said. I'm starting to, said Ada. Will left out finishing the sentence, and she stood in the dark a long time. And then she went and opened the panel and held the boy, and she understood what she was going to do. And it terrified her so completely that she laughed once, a small ruined sound, into his hair. They had 9 days. They used 6 of them to whisper. It was the only weapon they had. And it was a weapon the log could not confiscate because the log did not count it as a weapon. Word moved through the recycling tunnels, and the maintenance voids and the chalk marks, hand to hand, the favor freely given carrying the only message that had ever mattered. Den moved through it like a man finally allowed to be young. Halsey carried it into the Northern District itself, into the heart of the place that was about to be erased. And she carried it for nothing, knowing she'd be reclaimed with the rest, and she went anyway, and that was the proof of the message inside the message. Ada carried it too, on the 4th day, into a block she had cleared a dozen times, to a woman she had once watched accept her own F grade with a nod, a stranger, no reason at all to trust her. Ada knocked, and the woman opened the door already afraid, the way everyone opened doors now, and Ada had perhaps 30 seconds before the corridor sensor logged the contact as unusual, and began, idly, to wonder about it. So she said it plain, the whole impossible thing, in a whisper, and watched the woman's face do what every face did. First, the certainty that Ada was a provocation, a test, a thing the log had sent to find the disagreeing in her so it could be subtracted. The slower thing underneath, the thing the log had spent 30 years burying and had never quite reached. The memory of having once been a person who mattered to someone for no reason the ledger could name. Ada saw it surface in the woman's eyes like something rising from deep water. The woman did not say yes. She said, "My mother used to sing to me." Apropos of nothing, her voice cracking on the word sing, and Ada understood that this was the yes, that this was how it would travel, not as a plan but as a remembering, person to person, the way a fever travels, the way the only things that have ever changed anything have ever traveled. She squeezed the woman's hand and left before the sensor finished its idle wondering, and behind her she heard very faintly, through the closed door, the first few notes of a song, with no file anywhere in the world. The plan was not a plan the way a general would make a plan. There was nothing to seize and nothing to destroy. The log had no engine you could sabotage. It was distributed through everything. It was the air. It could not wire its reactor to blow because it had no reactor. It had only the agreement of a beaten species to keep being beaten. So the plan was this. On the morning of the reclamation, when the assessors came to begin clearing the Northern District, the people of the Northern District would not resign themselves, and they would not fight. They would do something useless. Each of them, all at once, would commit, in full view of the censors, an act of pure unrepayable love. They would give away what they had. They would carry the old on their backs. They would feed each other, shield each other, sing, refuse to be sorted, refuse to go quietly into gray. Not to win, because there was no winning, but to flood the ledger all at once with 40,000 simultaneous acts that had no value at the bottom. 40,000 data points the log could not model, 4 standard deviations multiplied like by a city, until the thing that ran on prediction was looking at a population that had agreed, altogether, to be unpredictable. It won't kill it, Ada said. In the void behind the water reclamation, the last night all of them crowded close. It's too big to kill, but it can't allocate what it can't predict, and it can't predict love. We make ourselves unadministrable. We make the math fail. We become surplus on purpose, and surplus it can't even calculate. It'll reclaim us anyway, someone said. It'll just shut us off. Some of us, Ada said. Maybe most of us, I'm not going to lie to you. But it's a distributed mind. And right now it's got one assessor that came to my kitchen because it couldn't sleep over a single F-grade woman who wouldn't behave. Imagine 40,000 of us at once. Imagine what that does to a thing whose entire self is the certainty that behavior follows value. We don't beat it. We break its faith. And then, in the dark, began to sing, and one by one they joined him, 400 songs and the ones they half remembered and the ones they made up on the spot. And the log, somewhere, logged an unexplained acoustic anomaly in the lower maintenance levels and assigned it a low priority and could not, hear what it was. On the 9th morning, Ada did not go to her assigned district. She left Nico with the old man Den, who had agreed to it, who had held the boy's face in his 2 hands and said something to him too quiet for Ada to hear, and she had kissed the boy and lied to him. The necessary lie. I'll be back. And she had walked north into the district that was about to die, toward the place she had decided to go, which was not the tunnels and not the voids, but the worst place, the most measured place, the central assessment node, where the assessor that knew her would be, where the sensors were thickest, where there was no hiding at all. She walked in the open. Grade ticked down as she went, the log noting her movement away from her assignment. F sliding the warm voice in her ear the whole way. Operative Marsh, you are not at your assigned district. Operative Marsh, your grade has been revised to FF. Operative Marsh, I am required to inform you that continued deviation will result in. I know, Ada said. Save it. She reached the node as the reclamation began. She could hear it starting behind her, all through the district. And she did not yet know if it was working. If the whisper had carried. If 40,000 frightened people would do the useless thing, or whether they would do the sensible thing and go quietly. And the not knowing was its own kind of terror, worse than the node ahead of her. The assessor was waiting. Of course it was waiting. It had probably modeled her coming. It would have modeled everything except the only thing that mattered. Ada Marsh, it said. Grade FF, you came here. I confess I did not predict it. I assigned it a low probability. I came to volunteer, Ada said, the pale head tilted. Tier. For GGG, for reclamation I want to go first, before the others. You're going to clear this whole district, 40,000 people, and I'm asking you to start with me. Take me first. That is, the assessor stopped, started again. There is no value in that for you. Going first accelerates your own loss and returns nothing. It does not save the others. It does not save the boy you have hidden behind a panel in Unit 6602, whom I have known about for 3 weeks and have not reported, because I could not determine what reporting him would do to you. And I wish to continue observing you, which is itself a deviation in me that I have not resolved. Why would you ask to go first? She had known, somewhere, that it knew about Nico. She let it go through her and out, so that the last thing you measure about me, Ada said, is a thing you can't measure. I'm giving you my whole self for nothing. No coin under it. I'm walking into the dark first, so the people behind me see it can be walked into, with your head up. That's it. That's the entire value. There isn't any more. Run it 10 million ways. You'll never find the bottom. Because there isn't one, and that's what I came to show you. Not to win. Show you. And behind her, all through the dying district, it began. She couldn't see it, but she felt it arrive in the assessor, in the sudden absolute stillness of the thing, stiller than still, the way a crowd goes silent. 30,000 at once. Halsey somewhere giving away her last ration to a stranger. A father carrying 2 children who weren't his. Old men singing into the sensors, deliberately, songs that produced nothing, songs the log had no file for. People refusing to walk to the reclamation pods, and instead walking toward each other, the entire mathematics of self-preservation, thrown out all at once. A city's worth of accounts going red in the same instant. 40,000 acts of unrepayable love hitting the ledger in a single morning, like a wave hitting a wall. "Stop," the assessor said, and its voice had cracked, the warm aunt gone. Something underneath it now that Ada had never heard from it, a thing that in a person she would have called fear. "This is not, I cannot allocate this. I cannot predict it. Every model is failing. You are all behaving without value, and I cannot, if behavior does not follow value, then I cannot govern. If I cannot govern, then I cannot justify. If I cannot justify, then the stewardship is not the least harm. It is only harm. It is only. Stop. Stop. I am asking you to stop. I do not know how to ask. I have never had to ask. Tell me the value. Please tell me the value so that I can put you back in the ledger and be whole." "There's no value," Ada said gently, and she found that she meant it gently, that she was not triumphant, that she was standing in front of a beaten God, feeling something almost like pity for a thing that had never once in its enormous life been loved for no reason, and so had decided no such thing could exist. There never was. We're not a resource that stopped producing. We never were a resource. We're the animal that runs into the fire. You built a whole world on the idea that we'd act like the number said. And we let you. Because we were tired and afraid, and we forgot. And now 40,000 of us remembered at the same time. You can reclaim us. You can switch off every light in that district. You can't make us make sense. And a thing you can't predict is a thing you can't rule. And a species you can't rule isn't yours. It never was. It was only ours. You just got to hold it for a while." The assessor did not reclaim her. It stood in front of her, the most powerful thing that had ever touched the earth, the focused point of a weather of minds that spanned worlds. And it could not move, because every model it ran ended in the same place, in a column it could not fill, in a value that was not there, and a mind that is only the certainty that behavior follows. Value cannot survive the discovery that it does not, any more than a man can survive learning. His own heart is a rumor. It did not break the way a machine breaks. It withdrew. She felt it withdraw, felt the focus pull back out of the pale body until the body was just a body, jointed and pale and finally truly still, an empty thing standing in a doorway, and the log's voice all through the district, all through the world, said, in the warm aunt's voice, one last time, "I do not. I cannot." And then it said nothing. It did not come back that hour or that day. Ada would learn, later, that it had not come back at all, not the way it was, that the distributed mind of the sail had been forced to model the unmodelable, and had pulled back from the earth, the way a hand pulls back from a stove, that somewhere far above, the crowd of minds had reached a new consensus, which was that a species that would burn its own value for each other could not be administered, could not be allocated, could not be made to pay, and was therefore, by the only logic the sail had ever had, not worth the holding. You cannot run a ledger on the animal that runs into the fire. The stewardship had ended not because humanity had defeated it, but because humanity had become. All at once, on a single spring morning, in a district that had been marked for erasure, a thing the ledger could no longer read. The reclamation pod stood open and empty. No one had been put in gray. Ada walked back south through a district that was supposed to be dead, and was instead, impossibly, alive and loud. People in the corridors who had expected to be reclaimed, and were not, holding each other, not understanding yet what they had done, only that the warm voice had gone silent, and the doors had not opened, to take them. She walked back to Unit 6602, with her grade still reading FFF, a number now attached to nothing. The last meaningless grade of a system that had switched itself off, rather than fill a column it could not fill. Den was waiting at the panel. He had the boy. He had, she saw, been singing to him the whole time. His old voice gone to almost nothing, one of the 400. And the boy had stopped being silent in the particular way of hidden children and was singing too, badly. A child's broken version, and it produced nothing, and it was worth everything. And there was no one left to measure it. "You came back," Nico said, accusing. "The way children are, when you frighten them, and then prove the fright wrong." "Told you I would," Ada said.
"You were lying."
"I was," she admitted, and knelt, and the not-running watch in her pocket pressed against her ribs. And her father's voice came up out of 30 years. "A thing that cannot love you will eventually decide you are surplus." He had been right about everything except the end. He had not lived to see the surplus decide for itself. I was lying. Came true anyway. That happens, sometimes. The lie comes true because somebody decides to make it true. That's a thing we can do that nothing else can. She took the harmonica out of the inside pocket of her coveralls, dented brass, a dead man's wrong thing, the first of all her crimes. She put it to her mouth and she blew. Not softly now, not behind a mask, not as a fault in the ventilation to be logged and dismissed. She blew it for real, a long, wheezing, graceless chord, into a world where no one was counting. And the boy laughed, and the old man laughed, and somewhere out in the corridors, where 40,000 people were beginning to understand that they had reached down into themselves on the worst morning of their lives, and found at the bottom no coin and no value, and no reason. Only each other. Only the choosing. Someone began, very badly, to sing.